Hey, Corbin here, and I want to show you how to make kitchen cabinets by following along as I make my own for my kitchen. In the last episode I gave an overview of the cabinets. Now I'm going to use the computer to make my own plans. This is a little boring, but it's necessary for any custom cabinet. Alright, I want to talk about designing my kitchen island and actually going ahead and making it. So I have the design here in SketchUp, and I'm not going to talk about how to create the file in SketchUp, but I want to go from a SketchUp design that you have to actual plans and building it from scratch. So inside of my model, I like to create things in different layers. So I can go ahead and hide the countertop and sink layer, and that eliminates that so I can more easily see other pieces. I have a cheap plywood layer, and so I can go ahead and hide that. I also want to hide the drawer fronts and door fronts, and also the drawers themselves. By putting them all in separate layers, it allows me to way more easily isolate what I want to work on at any particular time. So from there, I want to go ahead and concentrate on one of the pieces that I'm going to lay out the dimensions for. So I can go ahead and I usually group things, so I have each of the little portions in separate groups that I want to make. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit Command E to hide the portions I'm not going to concentrate on right now. I use a lot of shortcuts, so I hit H and O to constantly go back and forth in SketchUp really quick to move around. So this is the first portion which I need to make, and if you made any type of kitchen cabinets, you basically make the face frame first. So we want to dimension the face frame first. I think it might be easier in this particular case to hide the plywood itself, so I'm just going to go ahead and hide it. And what I'm left with is just the basic face frame that I want to create. And the reason I'm doing this is it allows me to keep the model all intact with just a few things hidden that I can easily unhide. The alternative way to do it is to kind of explode everything and drag it apart and duplicate your pieces. But if you duplicate it, anytime you make a change, you have to make a change in the duplicate place, and so that becomes a little bit unwieldy. So I find this to work really nicely. So inside here I can start dimensioning the pieces. I like to change the view to be isometric in the camera or parallel projection instead of perspective, and that gives you just dead on view. And from there I can bring up the dimensions tool and start dimensioning it. One thing that's nice to do is to create this on a separate layer, so let's do that right now. So a lot of my sizes are pretty standard, so this is going to be pretty quick and easy. I also like to do pulls from individual corners so that I can see if I have a problem when I'm actually going ahead and putting stuff together, and this helps a lot. And putting the pieces together. Once I have it all dimensioned up, then I'm going to go ahead and print some actual plans I can use to take to the shop. I could take the computer down there, and I do that sometimes, but it gets really dirty and dusty. Plus I like to write on the things that I print out. So I can just go ahead and see what it looks like when I have it selected and hit Command P to print. And it kind of just rearrange stuff to be the proper size. So in this particular case I want it to be rotated to use the landscape, and so I can go ahead and try and remember where that is, probably page setup or document setup. Yeah, and then I can do it again to print, and that looks a lot bigger. Got a little bit of white space over on the other edge, and that's because my model size of what it's printing is exactly based on what you would see in the viewport. And so this looks like I should be able to see everything. So let's go ahead and print it. You could open it up in preview to do a preview of it just to make sure it will print okay. One of the things you may notice is I add a lot of extra bits that aren't really necessary, extra dimensions, and I find it very helpful to just double check. So you'll notice that I haven't actually filled in a lot of the joinery and how it all will go together, and that's because I kind of do it on the fly, and it's pretty simple. Basically, for the bottom piece and the shelves, which are plywood with a 1.25 inch front on it to hide the edge of the plywood, I use a tongue and groove, and that means the plywood needs to be 1/4 inch larger to accommodate the tongue that we put onto the plywood. I could also do a biscuit joint in that location, but I like doing a tongue and groove. The face frames themselves are attached together with pocket hole screws. I use 2 screws per joint, and it's pretty simple to do and quick. It also allows me to assemble it without any clamps, and it can glue up and I can do other stuff. Then the face frames themselves are attached to the whole assembly or the whole box via biscuit joints. I also attach the vertical pieces of plywood with biscuit joints. And that's a pretty easy construction, so I kind of do it all on the fly once I cut pieces out. So I don't actually write it in the model because I don't find it necessary. Okay, so I've gone ahead and printed up all my dimensions, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and mark each of the pieces with a letter directly on my plans, and that way I can know what number of each particular piece I have to cut, and I can do them all at the same time, which is a little bit faster. So once I do that, I can actually go to the shop and start cutting stuff up. Yeah. Alright, so that's a general overview of how I dimension my model to create my own plans from a SketchUp file. If you want to know how to make a SketchUp file of a kitchen or some other woodworking thing, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try and create a tutorial video on how to model stuff up in SketchUp. So the next episode, I'm going to actually go ahead and go to the shop and start cutting stuff up. It should be exciting.